Hi, good evening, or good afternoon, everybody. You may notice if you look at the program that my name is not, I am not Andres Acosta Ardilla. My name is Billy Pick. I am the fill-in this afternoon as the moderator for this panel. I am the vice chair of the board of trustees for Harm Reduction International, and in my previous job, I used to work for an agency that no longer exists called USAID. I was, but I retired 3 years ago, so it was okay. But I was the senior technical advisor for key populations, and before that, I worked in the San Francisco Department of Public Health AIDS office. So the idea of moderating a panel on CHEMSEX and MSM, being an HIV-positive gay man who has a long history of injecting and other drug use, it's not a reach for me. It's something that has been near and dear to my heart, both in my using days and as well as when I started doing public health work back in San Francisco in the early 90s. So I'd like to begin today. We've got a lot of great presenters today, and so without further ado, I'd like to start by introducing them. Dr. Charles Witzel is a senior research fellow at Mahidol University and the University College of London. Charlie's research focuses on health and well-being of LGBT people globally. Right now, he's running a program on of the work on sexual health, sexualized drug use among GBMSM in Thailand, and contributes to ongoing research on MPOX preparedness. He's going to be doing a presentation on developing a locally grounded definition of high fun, that's CHEMSEX in Thailand, with gay, bisexual, and other men who have sex with men in Thailand. It's a qualitative study. Charlie.
Hello, everybody. I'm super excited to be here today. It's my first Harm Reduction International. I'd like to start by saying to my Thai colleagues, Sawadi Khap, Pom Rusuk, Dijai Mak, Ti Hen Tukon Wani Khap. This is our study looking at developing a locally grounded definition of high fun and other sexualized drug use. So in terms of context, this study is part of a larger 6-year co-production research program, which is looking at examining sexualized drug use types among GBMSM, both cis and trans, in Thailand. This is from the formative research phase. In later years, we will run an online cohort with a nested qualitative substudy, and also co-develop a care framework with cohort participants. So in terms of definitions, I want to start by introducing 2 key concepts that we rely upon in this research. The first is sexualized drug use. So sexualized drug use means using one or more of a wide range of drugs before or during sex. High fun in Thailand, or CHEMSEX in Western settings, is the intentional use of specific drugs, usually methamphetamine, GHB, and other stimulants, to have prolonged sex, often with multiple partners. However, I want to acknowledge that this definition is really drawn from Western experience and scholarship, and part of the work that we're trying to do is refine this so that it's more useful for our context, so that it can be used by us as researchers and also service providers. So in terms of background, substance use is very intensely criminalized in Thailand. Recently, however, there's been a move to basically kind of decriminalize very, very small amounts of substances, in which case a public health approach can be taken. However, despite this, police continue to entrap and extort people who use drugs, and that includes GBMSM. In Thailand, there have been associations observed between sexualized drug use and increasing incidence of HIV and hepatitis C. There have also been mental health impacts explored, including anxiety, depression, and psychosis. When we did pilot research in support of this program, we interviewed service providers, and we found that boundaries between high fun and other types of sexualized drug use were not very well defined, and there was quite a lot of ambiguity about what high fun actually looked like in practice. So the aim of this research is to develop a locally grounded definition of high fun among GBMSM in Thailand. So we conducted focus groups and in-depth interviews with GBMSM engaged in sexualized drug use in the preceding 12 months. We had data collection sites in Bangkok, Khon Kaen, and Pattaya, And we selected these sites based on the diversity of the gay scene, tourism density, and also HIV prevalence. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, Bangkok and Pattaya are both very diverse cities with a lot of tourism and migration from other countries in the region, high-income Western countries, the Middle East, and also Sub-Saharan Africa. Whereas Khon Kaen is a city in Isan, which is rapidly developing economically, but has much less migration and much less tourism. We recruited through community-based organizations, and we used a thematic framework analysis informed by transnational queer sociology. So transnational queer sociology is a post-colonial theory and method, and it draws on queer theory and sociology to highlight how identity is formed among LGBTQ+ populations in Asia. And this sociology really centers the experience of Asian people and people within Asia, and it sees the influence of Western queer cultures as secondary, but important in some contexts. We like that it really focuses on the continent. This sociology also uses comparative analyses, which is very attractive for us, given that we work across 3 cities. So in total, we conducted 5 focus groups and 6 in-depth interviews with 30 GBMSM across our study sites. 7 of our participants were not born in Thailand, and they took part in English language data collection. Most, 23 out of 30, had used methamphetamine or ice before or during sex, with fewer taking other drugs. The sample was mostly highly educated, and 10 were living with HIV. So this is not the key focus of my presentation, but I want to introduce 3 different types of sexualized drug use that we identified. I'm just going to talk about high fun, but I'm very happy to discuss any of these afterwards. So high fun is how we think of chemsex. It's sexualized methamphetamine use, usually in a group context, and the main goal is to enhance intimacy and pleasure while extending the sexual session. And this is common across the 3 cities we work in. Home pause, in contrast, are large parties that involve different types of drugs, usually ecstasy, cocaine, ketamine, and GHB and GBL, but almost never methamphetamine. And these are parties that often take place after people go out or go to circuit parties, gather in someone's home or in a hotel. Sex is not a primary activity, but it can and does occur, and it's not conceptualized as high fun. These are more common in Bangkok and Pattaya because they're more well-developed queer scenes in these areas. Incidental sex and drugs is the situational combining of sex and drugs. This is often spontaneous and unplanned, and it includes a similar range of drugs to home pause and very rarely methamphetamine or never methamphetamine, and it's common across the 3 settings. We found that men conceptualized high fun based on 4 key criteria, and I'll talk about these one at a time. So the first criteria is intentionality and motivations. So as I said, high fun involves purposefully combining sex and drugs with one or more other men. And other types of sexualized drug use are not considered high fun, partly because the motivations are different. For high fun, for most people, the primary motivation is emotional, so it's around increasing pleasure, intimacy, and fun. For some individuals, especially those who have something bad that's just happened, death of a family member, they can use pleasure to deal with this stress. They can use pleasure as a coping mechanism. For a subgroup of men in our setting, socioeconomic motivations are also key. This is particularly true for men who sell sex. High fun is a very good way to increase their income through sex work, and so it's a very important strategy for many. In addition, particularly in Khon Kaen, high fun is very linked with wealthy westernized MSM or GBMSM, and so some people engage because of the possibility of sort of enhancing their social networks. Queer culture is a secondary motivation, and this can include things like learning from older peers, as well as socialization and belonging. The second criteria is drug choice and consumption methods. So in our focus groups, we asked men to come up with drugs and then rank them on a continuum from whether they were involved in high fun or other types of sexualized drug use. What we found was that ice, crystal methamphetamine, was absolutely central to high fun and likely foundational. If people weren't taking methamphetamine, the activity wouldn't be considered high fun, and most people, if not everybody, at the party also had to take meth. In contrast to other settings, ketamine and GHB, GBL are much less frequently used in Thailand. They can be included, but it's always a secondary drug, and if people were just using those, it wouldn't be considered high fun. In contrast, these 2 drugs are very, very firmly linked with other types of sexualized drug use, along with MDMA and cocaine. And similar to other settings, they're situationally useful drugs, so poppers and Viagra to enhance the sexual session, as well as cannabis and sedatives to manage come-downs. We also found some really interesting forces that were sort of shaping how people were consuming ice. There was substantial, during the COVID-19 crisis, there was substantial disruption to methamphetamine markets in Thailand, and that, plus differing degrees of government intervention, led to very wide variations in quality of ice, and this incentivized injection because people needed to make sure they were going to get high. In addition, those laws that I described, allowing for a public health approach for possession of very small amounts of substances, further incentivizes injection, and that's because individuals are very concerned about taking larger amounts out with them. So if you have a smaller amount, you get more bang for your buck if you're injecting it, if you're slamming it. Finally, injection equipment is much easier to hide and or dispose of than smoking equipment, and so this also incentivizes injection, and it's particularly an issue in Bangkok, where there are frequently police checkpoints looking at trying to identify people who are using drugs. So accompanying this, there's been a shift in drug consumption norms, and there's a very strong sense that injecting is a normative practice, especially among Thai GBMSM. This process is felt to have begun in Bangkok and then spread out to other cities in the country. It's also felt to be potentially underpinned by the influence of both Twitter and OnlyFans, where there's lots of content about this. People from other East Asian countries, as well as Falang, white Westerners, are assumed to inject less, and that potentially fractures high-fun scenes by ethnicity, especially in Bangkok. So the third criteria is technology and organization. High-fun is facilitated by and organized through online platforms. That's true in most settings. In Thailand, men also use these platforms to verify sexual partners and ensure that it's not police that are accessing the party. Twitter and closed groups on discussion on social messaging apps are also key platforms for cultural expression and meeting other men. Interestingly, in our setting, we find that the risk of criminalization leads to men forming closed groups with individuals they've met through online sources, basically to ensure that police are not infiltrating their high-fun sessions. And these networks are often mixed in Pattaya, separated by ethnicity in Bangkok, partly because of differences in drug consumption, and by class in Khon Kaen. The men who took part in our research, who are from higher socioeconomic positions in Khon Kaen, describe being very concerned about engaging in high fun with people of lower social class because of risk of gossip. So the fourth criteria is setting choice. So high fun nearly universally takes place in a private setting in Thailand. And this is informed by balancing the realities of the built environment with risks of criminalization and also potential for violence from other men. So in Bangkok, condos are the most preferred location, despite the potential risk of violence, because it was very difficult for police to gain access to them. Private homes are less popular in Khon Kaen and Pattaya because people tend to live more in shop houses, terraced houses, and the risk of gossip from neighbors is quite high. It's also easy for police to gain access. In these two cities, hotels minimize the risk of gossip and also violence from other men, but lead to greater risks of discovery by staff and therefore the police. Public settings, which are sometimes used in other countries, are very, very rarely used in high fun because of the high risk of both discovery and interpersonal violence, meaning that there's essentially no upside to using them. So taking all of this together, we've come up with this definition of high fun. And for us, high fun in Thailand is intentionally combining sex and methamphetamine to enhance intimacy and pleasure with one or more other men, facilitated by technology, and usually in a private setting. So in conclusion, the legislative environment has a really outsized impact on high-fun drug consumption and also modes of organization. Injection of ice is really increasing due to recent legislative changes. Providing safe injection support and also sterile syringes is a critical priority in our setting. We think that decriminalization can reduce harms related to police violence and also potentially from injection. So I'd like to thank the conference organizers for inviting us to present, to all of you for listening to us, our participants for sharing their stories, brilliant study team and community advisor group, and most of all, our collaborators, IHRI, HON, and ACT team who supported recruitment. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Great presentation. We'll take questions at the end for everybody, so allow us or indulge us into doing this. Our next presentation is from Liria Morales, and they gave me the bio and they gave me the bio in Spanish, so I'm going to read it in Spanish, and then I'm going to translate it in English, because I don't know if everybody who's got the English, don't bother taking your earphones. I mean, at least for me, you'll have to take them out. Liria es una usuaria de drogas, activista, antropóloga, feminista, y tiene 10 años de trabajo en el tema de drogas en Costa Rica y la región, llevando la reducción de daños, la eliminación de estigma y la discriminación hacia las personas que usamos drogas a la discusión y acción académica, colectiva y legislativa del país. Liria is a drug user, activist, anthropologist, and a feminist. She has 10 years of working in the field of drugs in Costa Rica and the region on harm reduction, the elimination of stigma and discrimination towards people who use drugs in the debate and academic fields, in the community, and in the legislative process of the country. On behalf of Isaac Melamed, Ricardo Baruch, Levinson Niño, Rico Vasconzalez, please welcome Liria Morales.
Hola, listo. Bueno, yo lo voy a hacer desde aquí para poder moverme un poco mientras hablo. Y bueno, como ya lo dijimos en la presentación, yo vengo a hablar sobre CHEMSEX en América Latina. Y este es un estudio que realizamos el año pasado, ya a principios del año pasado ya lo terminamos. Y es un estudio que realizamos en 4 países de América Latina, en Costa Rica, que es de donde yo soy, en México, Colombia y Brasil. Ok, bueno, las características de la investigación, fue una investigación cualitativa, realizamos entrevistas y grupos focales, esto específicamente a hombres que tienen sexo con hombres. Y bueno, el otro día yo decía como un chiste, que es una investigación sobre hombres, pero lo viene a presentar una mujer. Y bueno, yo digo, hay mesas de debate sobre aborto donde solo opinan los hombres, entonces bueno, yo vengo aquí también. Y bueno, como les comentaba, esto es en 4 países de América Latina, y la intención de este estudio pues es indagar sobre los conocimientos en reducción de daños, en cuidados y demás que implementan los hombres. A partir de eso también identificar los comportamientos y para poder proponer estrategias de reducción de daños que, pues valga la redundancia, tomen en consideración todas esas particularidades que vimos en el campo. Pero bueno, primero, ¿qué es el CHEMSEX? Igual agradezco a mi compañero que expuso anteriormente, que ya dio una introducción a este tema. Y bueno, es básicamente el uso de drogas en prácticas sexuales para potenciar las experiencias y el placer. En esto, pues, aquí todos o quienes somos usuarios de drogas y tenemos sexo, pues probablemente hayamos tenido CHEMSEX, ¿verdad? Con fumarnos un porro y ya estar con nuestra pareja o nuestras parejas, pues ya lo estamos practicando. Los hombres que tienen sexo con hombres y las mujeres trans han sido las poblaciones que mayormente han sido documentadas y hay mayores estudios sobre estas 2 poblaciones. Sin embargo, como les decía, no es exclusivo de estas poblaciones y pues es importante poder ampliar esto a las demás para poder generar estrategias que consideren a todas las poblaciones. Como principales drogas está la metanfetamina, la cocaína, la ketamina y el G. También otros estimulantes como el poppers y medicamentos para la erección. Bueno, como algunos riesgos que están asociados al CHEMSEX, hay una menor adherencia a tratamientos médicos, esto por dos razones principales. Una, porque hay una creencia de que no se pueden consumir medicamentos si se están usando drogas. Sin embargo, pues puede haber un plazo, ¿verdad?, en el que se le dé al cuerpo este tiempo para que pueda asimilar las sustancias y pues no perder el tratamiento o el día de tratamiento porque se está usando drogas o se está en este contexto. Y lo otro es porque las personas no pueden ir a decirle a su médico, ayer fui a una fiesta y me tomé 7 gramos de cocaína, y no puede ir a decirle a su médico porque muy probablemente lo que va a pasar es que le van a expulsar de los servicios de salud, les van a quitar sus medicamentos y pues no puede tener acceso a esta información, ¿verdad? Y esto nos lleva a que hayan consecuencias en la salud física justamente por eso, porque no pueden ser abiertos con las personas con las que reciben su tratamiento y pues claro, viven en exclusión y demás, y tiene afectaciones también a nivel de su salud mental. Y por otra parte, el estigma y la discriminación, que es una de las consecuencias pues más fuertes, ¿verdad? Y justamente como lo comentaba antes, está el rechazo por el personal de salud y también el rechazo por sus pares LGBTQIA+, por ser usuarios de drogas. Entonces, está esto, limita aún más el acceso a los servicios y también el acceso a estrategias de reducción de daños que puedan compartirse entre pares. Y bueno, como parte de los resultados que tuvimos en esta investigación, está que la metanfetamina en 3 de los 4 países fue la sustancia principal. El país en el que no fue la principal fue en Costa Rica, justamente de donde yo soy. Y esto es una tendencia que se da a nivel centroamericano. En este caso en específico, pues hice la consulta con mis otros compañeros pares de Centroamérica y pues me reportaban muy similar a lo que pasa en Costa Rica, y justamente por eso también creo que es importante señalar que estos estudios pues no solamente se realicen en Latinoamérica, sino también específicamente en Centroamérica, con las particularidades que nosotros tenemos allá. Y bueno, en los medicamentos para la erección, el G, los poppers, pues también, ¿verdad? Es lo que yo les presentaba antes, es parte de la literatura, ¿verdad? De lo que se tiene sobre esto, y pues estos ya los resultados que sí se asemejan a lo que encontramos. Con respecto a los cuidados, sí hay una identificación de las prácticas de cuidado, ellos sí conocen cuáles son las prácticas, e inclusive estas prácticas son compartidas entre ellos en los momentos en los que están practicando el chem o el sex o el chemsex. Ay, perdón. Y bueno, la mayoría de estas personas también conocen su estado serológico y muchas de ellas también están dentro de un programa de PrEP que hayan en sus países. Como riesgos también que encontramos está el uso limitado del condón y el lubricante. También hay un acceso limitado a servicios de salud mental. Esto por lo que les comentaba antes, ¿verdad? Justamente esta exclusión y el estigma de la discriminación que hay alrededor de las personas que ejercen el chemsex, pero también justamente lo limitado que son los servicios de salud en nuestros países y en Latinoamérica. Y pues no cualquier persona puede ir y pedir que por favor necesita el apoyo para un servicio de salud mental y se lo van a brindar, ¿verdad? Casi que solamente en casos de emergencia se da la atención. Entonces también esto es como uno de los grandes limitantes y exclusiones que hay en nuestros países. Y esto aunado pues al estigma y la discriminación de parte de la sociedad y también por parte de las personas pares de la comunidad. Bueno, y a partir de eso también desarrollamos 3 perfiles, ¿verdad? Que justamente es basado en la información que recolectamos. Bueno, comentarles que fueron cerca de 40 entrevistas y 4 grupos focales que realizamos y en base a pues, todos estos datos que recolectamos, formulamos esta tabla con estos 3 perfiles, que la idea es que estos 3 perfiles sean, a la hora pues, de brindar la atención, se pueda hacer más especializado también hacia las personas que van a acceder. Principalmente el perfil 1 es una persona pues, que conoce las prácticas, que las implementa, tiene un uso esporádico, utiliza condón y lubricante, prepara sus medicamentos, ¿verdad? Por ejemplo, puede poner, algunos de ellos señalaban que ponían alarmas en su celular para no olvidar tomar la medicación, o lo colocan en lugares estratégicos donde sabe que antes de dormir lo va a ver. También, por ejemplo, ha llevado un acompañamiento dentro de estas experiencias con otros pares y otras personas pues, que también le van explicando pues, cómo se va sintiendo, de qué forma se puede cuidar, si está sintiendo esto, qué debería hacer y demás. El otro, pues, el perfil número 2 es alguien que implementa un par y conoce algunas, sin embargo, pues solamente va de acuerdo a las posibilidades y el momento también de hacerlo y también procura su adherencia y utiliza el lubricante y condón solo en algunas ocasiones. Sin embargo, esta persona también delega la responsabilidad a su pareja y pues no se hace responsable como tal y también pues tuvo experiencias a veces acompañadas y a veces no. Y pues ya el perfil 3 sería una persona que no implementa estas prácticas y que combina las drogas para maximizar la experiencia y esta persona también podría considerar que tiene algún problema de salud mental. Varios de ellos nos comentaban eso, ¿verdad? Que consideraban que algunas de las prácticas que tenían iban en contra de lo que ellos consideraban que era bueno para su salud. Sin embargo, pues esto lo veían como una forma erótica, ¿verdad? Y erotizaban justamente ese riesgo asociado a todo esto. Entonces, ese estaría como dentro del perfil 3. Ok, bueno, y ya como para dar unas recomendaciones a partir de esto, y de nuestra investigación sería un enfoque interseccional, justamente por lo que hablaba de esta erotización del daño, ¿verdad? Y traer aquí a colación que es muy importante el enfoque que tengamos en nuestras investigaciones y que las recomendaciones también pues las basemos en todo el contexto, ¿verdad? Y que justamente esta erotización del daño en este grupo de hombres es justamente por el machismo y por el pretender, ¿verdad?, de que todo esto, el hacerse daño, de demostrar quién es más fuerte y demás, pues responde justamente a esa estructura en la que nosotros vivimos. También, ¿verdad?, que las campañas que realicemos estén basadas en las necesidades de la población, ¿verdad?, y que sea una investigación participativa, que las personas, pues, que no sea algo construido a partir de otras personas, que es lo que ellos consideran que estas personas deberían de acatar, ¿verdad? Pues esto no tiene sentido y al final no tiene, o sea, ya creo que hay demasiada evidencia como que este enfoque no funciona y pues ya sería como muy obstinado de nuestra parte seguir creyendo que podemos crear campañas sin saber qué es realmente lo que necesita la población. Y justamente, ¿verdad? Lo importante de que haya un cambio estructural y de determinantes dentro de las políticas y los enfoques, pues también, ¿verdad? El alcance de nuestras campañas y de lo que podamos realizar, pues también está limitado por las políticas y lo que nos permite la legislación en nuestros países. Entonces, justamente un cambio estructural es demasiado necesario. Y ya en los servicios de salud, ¿verdad? Justamente lo que les comentaba antes, que haya un cambio en este enfoque, que no sea prohibicionista, sino más bien que se enfoque en la salud y en el bienestar y en que las personas que requieren estos servicios pues, puedan acceder y no lo vean limitado por una decisión que está tomando sobre su cuerpo, ¿verdad? Y ya lo otro, ¿verdad? Que es lo último que quería decir, que es justamente sobre el término CHEMSEX, que es un término que está en inglés y que tenemos la tarea de ver qué término creamos para nuestra región y que se adapte también a nuestro contexto y a nuestra realidad latinoamericana. Y igual, ¿verdad? Las comunicaciones que hagamos pues no sean con anglicismos, sino pues que lo traigamos a nuestro contexto. Y pues ya, eso sería. Muchísimas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, Liria, por una buena presentación. Thanks, Liria, for a great presentation. Our next presenter next we have co-presenters. Our co-presenters for the next portion of this are Jorge Flores-Aranda, who's one of the presenting presenters. He is a professor at the School of Social Work at the University of Quebec at Montreal. He holds the Canada Research Chair, Trajectories, Diversity, and Substances. He's interested in the links between substance use and sexuality and works in close collaboration with community-based organizations. His co-presenter today is Rocio Mota Ochoa from the University of Montreal, and they will be presenting on behalf of Yannick Gaudet and Guy Tardif and Jorge Flores-Aranda on how to mobilize community strengths model and harm reduction interventions for people who practice chemsex.
Buenas tardes. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you are doing well. So I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in a traditional territory of the Muisca and Huitoto peoples, the first people of Bogotá. We are part of a panel on chemsex in the Global South. Yet our research sits in Montreal, Canada, which is technically in the Global North. So why we are here? We are here because both we come from the Global South, and also from our positionality, we critically analyze the conceptual frameworks to discuss on chemsex. I'm very happy to share the floor with my dear friend and colleague, Rocio. So we will start by defining some key concepts. I know it's going to be the third chemsex definition you have seen today, but it's something which is very nice is that all three definitions are very coherent. So what is chemsex or party and play? Because in Canada and North America in general, we talk about chemsex or party and play, PNP. For us, it's a form of sexualized substance use. But there is still a debate about what exactly chemsex is. And these debates are based especially in which populations are practicing chemsex and for which population we are speaking. Also, what kind of substances are used in chemsex context. And also, we see that there is an absence or a lack in the literature of Global South perspective in the definition of chemsex. So I'm very happy of the presentation of Charlie for bringing some South definition of chemsex. Thank you, Charlie. And so this lack of definition from the Global South indicates epistemic injustice. So we adopt a broad definition. So for us, chemsex is a practice associated with queer culture that involves the voluntary consumption of certain substances with the intention of facilitating, intensifying. Oh, I'm sorry. You know, I'm. Oh.
I can do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Rocio. I'm not good with two things, I'm able to do one thing at a time. I'm very guy on this thing, I'm very good with my hands, yes. So yes, we adopt these definitions. For us, it's a practice associated with queer culture, and that involves the voluntary consumption of certain substances with the intention of facilitating, intensifying, or prolonging sexual encounters, whether with one or more partners. It may involve also a different psychoactive substance that can influence the sexual experience, and also involve different group of sexual and gender diversity people. And the practice of chemsex may involve risk, of course, like any other substance use, but it's not problematic in itself. So we are talking today about the minority strength model. And maybe you have heard about the minority stress model, another one that has been traditionally dominated the research, emphasizing the negative impacts associated with minority identities. But recently, in 2020, Perrin and his collaborators introduced and validated the minority strength model as an alternative and also complementary framework to the minority stress. So this model underscores how personal and collective strengths within minority populations foster resilience and contribute to positive mental and physical health outcomes. So we use this lens to analyze the data coming from a project named the PNP Within Diversity Project, which the objective were to describe the trajectories of methamphetamine use among sexually and gender diversity men and non-binary people in Montreal. Why methamphetamine? Because it's the substance the most used in Montreal in the context of chemsex. The other objective was to identify their health and social services needs and to propose guidelines for the care of these populations. But today we'll talk only about the results that are coming from the objective one. In terms of methodology, it was a community-based research, and we conduct a structured interview that lengths an average 90 minutes with sexually and gender diversity men and non-binary people using methamphetamine or who have used it in the past 5 years. And we analyze the data with using the thematic analysis, and we co-codify more than 20% of the material. So we met 64 people, 64 men and non-binary people. The majority of them live in the big metropolitan Montreal area, and less, more few proportion from the Quebec City and other minor cities in Quebec province in Canada. The majority of them self-identify themselves as a gay people, bisexual people, pansexual, queer, or other sexual orientation. So it was a questionnaire that people completed after the interview. So the categories were not mutually exclusive, so people could identify to multiple categories. And in terms of gender identity, the majority were cisgender, but we have also non-binary people, genderqueer, trans, questioning people, and also two-spirit. We have identified 4 strengths. The first one was the sense of the community. The second one, the information sharing. The third, the support networks. And the 4th, the care practices. For the sense of community, people told to us that they create connections and safe spaces with other people practicing chemsex. As Liam said, that sometimes he go to somebody's place and he expected to have sex, but sometimes he didn't have sex with this person. They only talk, and they could spend 24 hours talking about different kind of topics, and they, socialize in this kind of setting. They talk also about the importance of feeling accepted in these communities of people who practice chemsex. And it brings also a space with non-judgmental support. Sorry for my sexy accent. English is my 3rd language, so please be kind with my accent. So Thomas said that, substance use is sometimes judged negatively. And people who practice chemsex are aware of this stigmatization, and they create small communities among people who practice chemsex to protect each other and also to feel reassured. People also share information, and it was peer-based prevention and guidance on substance use. Here in this quotation, Brian told us in very detailed way how he learned to inject methamphetamine. So he described how his partner showed him how to slam, which is the name that people have done for methamphetamine injection. And also, there are people who share with us some strategies to change some consumption practices. For example, here, Benjamin told us that he wanted to go in therapy, and he met some people in CHEMSEX context that wanted to do some therapies to change their consumption habits. And Benjamin told us that sometimes he felt to be as a role model to other people who want to change some of their consumption habits. So I'm gonna pass the microphone to Rocío.
Hello everyone. Hola a todo el mundo. ¿Qué tal? ¿Cuántos hablan español aquí? Bueno, continúo en español, ¿no? Bueno, otro de nuestros hallazgos es que hay todo un proceso de compartir información en estas redes, ¿no? Que además se ayudan las unas a las otras, ¿no? Por ejemplo, las personas, los pares, de pronto, en el contexto de CHEMSEX, comienzan a darse ayuda, a brindarse información de cómo llevar a cabo esta práctica de manera más segura. De esta manera se desarrollan también grupos informales de soporte que no necesariamente son creados por instituciones o por organizaciones, sino que emergen en el contexto del CHEMSEX. También es un lugar donde las personas se dan soporte emocional, ¿no? Y soporte práctico. Por ejemplo, es el tipo de información que no pueden compartir con otras personas, solamente con los pares, los que conocen la práctica de CHEMSEX. Entonces, bueno, ahí hay como buenas orejas y buenos consejeros para brindar la información que se necesita o para escuchar las cosas íntimas de estas personas. Al mismo tiempo, también se dan como consejos prácticos sobre, por ejemplo, dónde conseguir material limpio para el consumo de diferentes tipos de drogas. Algo que también es súper interesante y que tiene mucho que ver con lo que Liria nos ha presentado son las prácticas de cuidado. En contraste un poco a lo que Liria ha encontrado, nosotros hemos visto que hay muchas prácticas no tanto de autocuidado, sino de cuidado de los otros. Entonces, por ejemplo, a veces hay personas que tienen como un mal viaje cuando están consumiendo y uno de nuestros participantes, Elie, dice que cuando él ve que alguien se siente mal, inmediatamente él trata como de ayudar, de cuidar a la persona, ¿no? Ver que la persona esté dando consentimiento a tener prácticas sexuales, etcétera, ¿no? Entonces, generalmente se asocia el uso de drogas con la destrucción y lo que es súper interesante en el estudio de Liria y el nuestro es que se encuentran muchas prácticas de cuidado que rompen un poco este estereotipo del consumidor que solamente piensa en el placer y nada más. No, hay prácticas de cuidado mutuo y eso es súper interesante. Bueno, continuamos ya con las reflexiones finales y bueno, algo que nos parece interesante del Community Strength Model es que puede ser importante para el desarrollo de, no solamente de estudios, sino de intervenciones sobre CHEMSEX, ¿no? Que ayuden a los usuarios y a los practicantes de este tipo de sexo, ¿no? Asimismo, nuestra información sugiere que las prácticas de cuidado son prevalentes y son súper importantes en estas comunidades. Bueno, ¿qué nos dice nuestros lo que hemos encontrado en el terreno, de qué manera puede dialogar con los investigadores y también con los prestadores de servicios, los prestadores de salud, ¿no? Creo que eso habla de la importancia de la fuerza de la comunidad y que esta fuerza de la comunidad tiene que ser integrada en las intervenciones. Asimismo, nos obliga, yo creo, y nos empuja de manera muy interesante a pensar la reducción de riesgos, la reducción de daños de una manera mucho más inclusiva, mucho más simétrica, ¿no? Con las personas que son los usuarios de las sustancias. Al mismo tiempo, es importantísimo involucrar a las comunidades en el desarrollo de las intervenciones y las estrategias. Asimismo, tenemos que pensar la forma a veces no de venir nosotros a co-crear una estrategia, sino de ver lo que ya está en el terreno y ver de qué manera nosotros podemos ponernos al servicio de esas intervenciones, de esas prácticas que ya se vienen desarrollando. Nosotros no somos los que lo sabemos todo, nosotros no sabemos nada, ellos saben mucho más que nosotros. También queríamos reflexionar un poquito sobre el enfoque de investigación participativa y de intervención participativa, ¿no? La importancia de la comunicación y la colaboración entre los prestadores de salud, los profesionales, las comunidades y los investigadores, la necesidad de programas co-construidos y también insistimos en que es súper importante prestar más atención a las prácticas locales de reducción de riesgos. Hemos reflexionado sobre esto en un artículo que hemos publicado hace unos años, ¿no? Estas prácticas hacen que los modelos teóricos exploten. La información del terreno tira por los suelos la teoría y la división entre teoría y práctica es completamente absurda. Entonces yo creo que hay que tener los ojos puestos en el terreno y ver de qué manera las prácticas locales pueden nutrir nuestros entendimientos. Bueno, antes de terminar quería agradecer a los que nos dan el dinero. No sé cómo traducirlo de una manera más elegante, disculpen. También a nuestros co-investigadores, a nuestros 64 colaboradores que han compartido ese conocimiento valioso con nosotros, a nuestro maravilloso equipo de investigación y, por supuesto, a nuestros colaboradores comunitarios, a los organismos que colaboran con nosotros. Algunas referencias y muchas gracias. Y gracias también a la Chaire de Recherche TRADI, Trajectoire, Diversité, Substance de la Université de Québec a Montréal. Muchas gracias.
Okay, thanks for that great co-presentation on mobilizing strengths for people who practice CHEMSEX in Canada there. The next presenter is somebody who you might not know, it is like a real hero in the movement. He's kind of like a hero of mine because I don't know how he does the work that he does. I first met Elie Aaraj in 2006 in Beirut when we had a harm reduction conference there, and he's been working in the field of HIV and harm reduction since 1987 in a part of the world that is extremely difficult, as you know, in Lebanon, going through turmoil for decades and decades. He founded a local Lebanese organization, Soins Infirmières et Développement Communautaire, CIDIC, which began with an in-home nursing project during the Civil War. And expanded to work on HIV and AIDS and drugs in the following years. In 2007, he became one of the founders of MINARA, which is the Middle East, North Africa, and HIV Harm Reduction Association, and has been its executive director ever since. Presenting on behalf of his co-author, Jolie Nasi, my friend Elie Aaraj. He's presenting on chemsex usage in Lebanon, so this should be.
Thank you, Benny. So, hi. This is mine. MINARA is a regional network. It is called Middle East and North Africa Harm Reduction Association that covers 20 countries in the MENA region, established in 2007 based on WHO and HRI initiative. Then it was registered as an international NGO in Lebanon, and it's based in Beirut. This presentation is focusing on chemsex use among men who have sex with men in Lebanon. I would like to give tribute to a linear line consultancy firm led by Ms. Taya Khouri and her team for conducting this study, supported by Mr. Jolie Naisi and Mr. Amjad Malaib from MINARA. The study's idea came based on community-led needs assessment that was conducted in 4 countries in the region. It was Lebanon, Jordan, Morocco, and Tunisia. We were not allowed to conduct it in Egypt, frankly. This is okay. So the chemsex refers to the deliberate use of substances like methamphetamine, GHB, and mephedrone during sex, mainly among MSM. While this phenomenon is studied globally, in Lebanon it is under-researched due to cultural taboo around sexuality and drug use. Although there is societal somehow tolerance, yet some same-sex practices are still criminalized in the country. This study addresses the intersection of chemsex with stigma, legal restriction, and sociocultural economic crisis in Lebanon, which increases the vulnerability of those involved. The study aimed to fill a critical gap understanding the chemsex practices in Lebanon. It explored usage trends, health outcomes, and service accessibility. It also sought to uncover the social and psychological motivations for engaging in chemsex and offers evidence-based recommendations tailored to the Lebanese context. The study utilized mixed methods approach. 1, a survey to collect demographic and behavioral data. We got 140 responses. 2, interviews for personal experiences. And 3, consultations with civil society organizations like SCOON and SIDC to contextualize the findings. Inclusion criteria including being 18+-year-old, identifying as LGBTQ+, or sex workers, and engaging in chemsex. Participants were mostly young to middle-aged cisgender gay men, urban-based, and relatively well-educated. Most were employed full or part-time. These demographics show that sex cuts across different social and economic statuses, not just marginalized groups. Crystal meth was the most used substance enhancing stamina and euphoria. GHB, GBL were described as balancers for relaxation. Many participants use multiple substances in a single session, increasing health risks. A small but concerning number practiced injection or slamming, often in secrecy due to the stigma. Participants engaged in CHEMSEX to escape from guilt, stigma around sexuality, and emotional distress. It offered a sense of liberation and help navigate feeling of loneliness or self-doubt. Some described it as a tool for self-acceptance, especially in a society that marginalized LGBTQ+ identities. High-risk sexual behavior was common, including low condom use and frequent group sex. Many experienced mental health struggles post-session, like anxiety and paranoia. A third were not tested for HIV or STIs in the past year, highlighting gaps in prevention and care. Though many knew about services, few accessed them due to distrust, past negative experience, or fear of being judged or prosecuted. Access to harm reduction tools like PrEP and clean needles was especially limited. These barriers reduce the likelihood of seeking timely health help. As for the role of the civil society organizations, they are leading harm reduction and outreach efforts. They provide testing, shelter, therapy, and other services. However, none have programs dedicated solely to CHEMSEX. Mental health services tailored to CHEMSEX users are also insufficient and underfunded. CHEMSEX trends in Lebanon mirror global patterns in terms of drug use and stigma. But Lebanon faces stronger barriers, criminalizations, cultural taboos, and under-resourced services. Countries like Vietnam and Malaysia show how community-based discrete interventions can improve access. Recommendations. The study recommends tailored programs that address CHEMSEX realities, not just general drug addiction. Mental health support must be trauma-informed. Legal reforms are needed to make services accessible without fear. Peer involvement and CSO collaboration are essential. Conclusion. The findings urge us to move beyond shame and stigma. A holistic, inclusive approach involving users, CSOs, and policymakers is vital. We must advocate for structural changes and invest in care that meets the lived realities and those affected. Thank you. You can find the full report on our website if you want. Thank you.
And our final presenter is Rita Gatonye from Kenya. Rita's a human rights advocate with 17 years of experience of drug use and street-based harm reduction advocacy. She coordinates Women in Response to HIV/AIDS and Drug Addiction, a network of women and youth using drugs in East Africa, working on capacity development and advocacy for harm reduction and drug policy reform. Rita will be presenting on CHEMSEX and community championing intersectional harm reduction education for LGBTQIA plus persons in Kenya. Karibu.
What language do you not speak? Very short. Okay. So good, is it evening? After Buenos tardes, everybody. It's good to be here. I know the last speaker is supposed to do a powerful presentation so we can go out with a bang, but that is not going to happen today. I'm sorry, but well, yes, it's going to be good. I'm not saying it won't be good, but I'm saying, speaking after these people is, I've just been learning. I even wanted to add to my slides, but So I want to take you back to the very beginning. We are at the very beginning of the CHEMSEX conversation in Kenya and the larger part of sub-Saharan Africa. So a lot of what we are here to do is to learn. How do you? Okay. Oops. How do I go back? Okay, here we go. So I will just give a bit of the context in Kenya, and when I speak of Kenya, I think I speak for the larger part of sub-Saharan Africa because what happens there is often replicated elsewhere. So we haven't had the idea of sexualized drug use being spoken about until recently during the COVID pandemic. So we haven't had the chance to have that conversation. But during the pandemic and the lockdowns, then we began to see increased normalization of group drug use, of group sex. Not that it wasn't there before, but it really became pronounced. Kenya is also a key transit route in the drug market framework, so as well as other countries in Africa. So the way drugs come in is not deliberately for them to be used in our countries, but they end up there anyway, and that's going to be important. So recently we've had the introduction and local production of substances that were previously unavailable in the last 5-10 years. Crystal meth only began being a thing maybe 5 years ago, crack cocaine maybe 3 years ago. Can you imagine that? Just 3 years, been missing out. Poppers maybe 2 years ago, MDMA, crystal meth, and ketamine as well. It's also important to point out that Kenya specifically is a highly sexualized society. I mean, I know everybody loves sex, but we really love sex. When people are thinking of farming and food security and the economy, Kenyans are thinking about sex. So it's good, but it's a problem as well. And I think that might be a function of collective trauma as well. We share it, and it's compounded in marginalized populations, especially key populations. In that region as well, we have inadequate social engagement systems. So substance use is our primary source of entertainment. There aren't enough options to maybe go to the theater or ride a bike or do the things that people would regularly do to let loose or to kind of enjoy ourselves. And that's part of why drug use is largely problematic in our region because of the lack of other systems. So there are also class differences in the choice of stimulants used. Remember, stimulants just came the other day for sexualized drug use. Poppers and ketamine and cocaine are quite expensive, so they are for the rich. Ecstasy and sativa for the middle class, and crack cocaine and lesser stimulants like khat for the regular people. I like what Liria said about the lack of localized sort of word terms and harm reduction strategies. Words like chemsex are so brand new. I mean, chemsex, narco-feminism, these are things that imagine if it's difficult for it to be adapted into Spanish, then what about African languages? Well, how do we break that down to understand? And that has also been a reason why our harm reduction has been stagnant in some sense. Yes, it works, but there's a need to kind of adapt it to our context, and that hasn't been happening. There's also almost a complete lack of data on chemsex practices or sexualized drug use. The understanding of it and the motivations in sub-Saharan Africa. I think South Africa is the only country that I know of, if there's any other country I would love to know, in Africa that has managed to do some work around chemsex and really talk about it. So one country out of 53 countries. So that's where we are. So I'm going to talk a bit about the barriers to harm reduction for sexualized substance use. As you can see, it's layered. There's many of them. So the obvious one is the limited understanding of drugs and drug use. Harm reduction itself is only 10 years old in Africa, where in other jurisdictions it's got 40 years, 50 years. So that's a problem. There's also drug user phobia among key populations. So the GBMSM community will, I don't want to say stigmatize, but be in fear of what they don't know. And even in key population spaces, because the people who use drugs are the least empowered, then there is that general phobia of anybody who uses drugs. It's a bit like Hualok in Thailand. I remember your presentation from yesterday. Also, the legal environment in East Africa has widespread ramifications. The Anti-Homosexuality Act in Uganda has just made it so that nobody wants to advance any more conversation than is already there. There's, of course, the double and triple criminalization due to drug user phobia, transphobia, sex work phobia altogether. There is also internalized stigma, which results in people who engage in chemsex being unwilling to adopt identities linked to drug use or to other stigmatized identities or to sex work, including their own sexuality. So the unwillingness to adopt any other, to be anything else than what you already are and what's already criminalized. Most people who engage in chemsex will say that they are recreational drug users. So even when there's a problem, they will never want to kind of admit, or even just say I'm a drug user, because drug user carries a lot of stigma. So it's going to be recreational drug use even when it's not. Yes, stigmatization at the hands of other community members who use different substances. So even within the drug using community, those who use cocaine will stigmatize those who use heroin. I know this is something that's common. Those who use cocaine will stigmatize those who use crack cocaine. And there's never that solidarity of, look, we're all using drugs. Yeah, nobody's better than the other because I just smoke weed, you do the hard stuff. You're not having as much fun as I am, And then the recent use of stimulant substances among young people and children. So that's something that we've seen in Kenya. There was a study done in the coast of Kenya that found cathinone use, specifically cat. I don't know if you've heard of cat, the East African chewable, is mostly being used by people from the age of as young as 9 to 24. So between 9 and 18, that's a large number. So because the conversation around stimulants has not been there, and then now it comes in, and it comes in with statistics such as these. So when you hear children are using stimulants, you demonize stimulants completely. So that is what's happening. That is what's happening within our context at the moment. Nobody even wants to kind of talk about stimulants. They're okay with opioids because the worst thing that you can do is sleep, according to them, or nod off. But for stimulants, they don't want us stimulated. There's also power dynamics in the LGBTQ community, and this was also mentioned in a session yesterday. So people who are not leaders in the programming space. If you're not a director of an organization, or if you're not somebody within the organization, you will not have access to spaces where these conversations are being had. And if I'm being honest, it's all due to the wanting to retain power and the scramble for resources, especially now. So people just don't have access to those spaces, even if they are there. The information will remain with the directors and trickle down when they feel like every now and then. Then, of course, there's a pathologization of people who use drugs, seen as incapable of exercising agency, and therefore being kind of relegated to needing to medical help all the time. That is something that also limits access for people engaging in chemsex. You don't want to just be pathologized, and all these issues serve to drive the LGBTQ community who engage in chemsex further into isolation than they already are. Harm reduction is considered opioid-centric only. We do not have harm reduction for stimulants. We've started the conversation now, thanks to you and ODC and others. But that fear of the unknown and the lack of services for stimulant harm reduction is also an issue. There's decreased violence reporting due to that double or triple stigma we talked about. The media, how the media engages with the idea of sexualized drug use, because there have been articles put out by our local media, but it's always from a problematic point of view. There is never, when they might talk about drug use in itself as, drug users deserve human rights, but when CHEMSEX is involved, or when you bring in the queer community, then it becomes, oh, this is a problem. Like you can choose a struggle, Cannot be queer and a drug user. I mean, what? Right? That is what they, and then, of course, there's a lack of services that acknowledge these intersecting realities of people who use drugs or engage in chemsex, or even sex workers. Our programming is still very siloed, where in other places, a sex worker can go to a drug user-led organization and get services or vice versa. It's still very difficult to do that in Kenya. So sex worker services are sex worker services. Drug user, just like that, right? Again, because of the scramble for resources. So, so with that background, I think we just realized we had to do something because nobody was going to do something, and it's understandable why, because of that stigma. So we wanted to take an approach that focused on equity, and we wanted to kind of use our expertise in drug use and sex work to start the conversation. We went by these are the guiding principles that we went by: lived experience and centering communities. So this is not something we just woke up and did. We sat down and had conversations with the GBMSM community specifically, and kind of introduced the harm reduction principles of non-judgment, practical action, person-centeredness, and meeting people where they are, the intersectionality of the key population framework, and really just we've been looking for something to unify us for such a long time. We've tried being unified by sex, being unified by HIV, but there's all these things. But we find that drug use is a unifier that nobody can argue with. I don't know, maybe it's just because we're all, it's within chemsex and outside of chemsex, drug use is something that every human being can enjoy without any other, without thinking of anything else. So that we used that intersectionality to unify us. Self-determination and meaningful partnership and collaboration. So we did not do a study, but now that I am hearing from all of you, I think that is the next logical step. So our early intervention was we just designed a basic training using materials from Mainline. Thank you very much, Ansela. So we just had a basic training on drug classifications. We had a training for the GBMSM community on drug classifications based on chemical makeup, effects, legal definitions and implications, analysis of substances most used by different key populations. So like for female sex workers, it's cocaine. For gay men, it's poppers, and so on and so forth. And for cishet men, it's heroin for some reason. Motivations or reasons for sexualized drug use and chemsex, the substances available, and the drug market trends in East Africa. Like I said, whatever drugs are used in Kenya will find their way to the rest of, to Tanzania, Uganda, Burundi, Zimbabwe, all the way down. Safe smoking and injecting practices, overdose and overamping, understanding prevention and management strategies. So what we've done so far, even as we continue to learn, is that we managed to engage 8 national and 10 local LGBTQ organizations and managed to kind of strengthen their capacities in a very basic way. Like I said, we're going back to the very beginning. At least they now know what chemsex is. I'm going to go back and tell them that there's a difference between chemsex and sexualized drug use. Thank you. I did not know that, so thank you, panelists. Yeah. So that has led to, we've kind of created a platform, an online platform for knowledge sharing and to begin that conversation around sexualized substance use. We've established referral pathways for healthcare and aftercare for harm reduction. So we've been in contact with harm reduction organizations in the areas where we've spoken to these people, and we've kind of made a gentle person's agreement on how to refer. And we are currently developing a roadmap for the integration of drug and sex education within harm reduction programs for key populations. And now we are going to embark on a study, thanks to all of you. Yeah. So, that's it. I would like to thank Mainline, of course, for the resources. I would like to thank the International Network of People Who Use Drugs for just pushing us to think beyond that. I would like to thank the GBMSM community in Kenya for taking us in and not seeing us as competitors for resources, but rather we just want to work together. Ben Collins, Ansela, everyone who was at dinner with us last night, because really I've learned so much from you, and my fellow panelists, thank you so much, and to all of you, thank you.
Thanks so much. I really want to thank all our panelists today. We're running a little short on time, so I want to actually give you the opportunity to break like 10 minutes early. And please take that time to come up and ask the researchers any individual questions that you might want at this point. So I'd like to thank you all for your attention. Again, a big round of applause for all our presenters. It's some great research here. And hopefully, despite the current global funding situation, we'll be able to implement some of the research that they've undertaken here. Very valuable. Thanks a lot.